We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio. We're having a character spotlight for the first one because it's really relevant due to the Ahsoka trailer that recently came out for the Disney Plus series. We are going to be focusing on Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Name.
Yes, which is a brilliant and amazing character that showed up in 1991 when Timothy Zahn wrote this amazing series called Heir to the Empire.
The trilogy we desperately needed.
Yes. It's set after the fall of the Galactic Empire. You know, the Emperor is dead. The New Republic has been established. And here comes this character, which, you know, the leader of the remains of the Imperial Navy, so to say. And, you know, our characters have to fight him. Now, with the purchase of Disney, though, things have kind of changed. But what I do enjoy and I do appreciate is how Disney knew that this character was pivotal to the Star Wars universe and was very important. So much so that they did bring him into the Disney universe through Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah.
Which is why we're having the continuation of the story with Ahsoka. However, because of their change, you know, Rebels happens before, you know, episode 4, 5, and 6. So why isn't he visible there? Well, they explain that as well. But it was really interesting how this character is, and to see him removed from the pages of a book and put onto the screen. And it's going to be even more exciting to see him in Ahsoka in live action. And the Lars Mikkelsen did the voice of Thrawn,
brother of Mads
TV
Mikkelsen.
series.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if it was Mads' brother.
Yes. And so he did a fantastic job of voicing Thrawn in Rebels. Just hearing the voice and the fluctuations of it, how he talks and everything is just brilliant and amazing. So, and those of you that don't know, Thrawn is Chiss. He's a Chiss, which is an alien race from the Chiss Ascendancy, which is out beyond the Outer Rim. And there was a book called Outbound Flight that was part of the extended universe where Anakin and Obi-Wan went on this experimental spacecraft and met the Chiss for the first time. And that was when Thrawn was, later on was supposedly first introduced. If that made any sense. Because Heir to the Empire was definitely first. But because of the Disney rewrite, they put him in. Timothy Zahn did a new series called The Thrawn Ascendancy, which rewrote Thrawn's history in the Star Wars galaxy.
Did it rewrite his history, or did it simply clarify?
It rewrote it. Because the Thrawn Ascendancy, it puts it where Thrawn was actively participating with Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, where that was never the case before.
That's interesting to note.
The book was fascinating because it's jumping around in time. Basically, the Emperor assigns Darth Vader and Thrawn to go out to do a mission. And then it jumps back in time, so you have these flashback scenes where Anakin and Thrawn are doing stuff, and Padme's there, of course. But because of this, Thrawn sees Vader fight. Thrawn saw Anakin fight in the past, and Thrawn determines that Vader is Anakin Skywalker. And, you know, and that's like the best known secret in the entire galaxy. And Thrawn can figure it out because of the way he fights, which is another amazing ability that this character has.
So let's start diving into some aspects of this, because like you, I think like everyone, my first introduction to Thrawn was reading the Heir to the Empire trilogy. And I think it might have a more I think it might have like a more exact title than that, but you have Heir to the Empire and then Dark Forces Rising or something. I forget what the other what the three titles
Dark
are.
Force Rising and The Last Command.
Thank you. Yes. I read all three of those and I utterly loved them. I was also like a teenager at the time, so but I started reading them again not that long ago, and I still love them. I still think that they are the most quintessential Star Wars books outside of the main trilogy.
I agree.
And Thrawn always struck me like we talk frequently about like in order for a game to be fun, there has to be a way to win, there has to be jeopardy, right?
Yes.
And that's true of when you're reading a story. When you're reading a story, you want to feel victory when the heroes are successful, but victory can only be felt if loss was a real probability, was a real possibility, right? There has to be jeopardy, and not just hokum and not just tropes, but real jeopardy to the characters you care about. And Thrawn posed this highly intellectual, non Sith driven power, this threat, this jeopardy to our characters. When you first read, do you remember what it was like when you first read about Thrawn?
Oh yes, I do. I was like you. This trilogy was my introduction, and it's pretty much the only thing that I know about Thrawn. I haven't followed him in that character and the other stuff. Other media. But I looked at this and man, it was a 180 degree shift from what I was used to for villains of the Empire. And later on, reading what Timothy Zahn had to say about it, that was his intent. He accomplished what he set out to do. And instead of having somebody being very menacing and being very physically threatening, this guy's intellect and his ability to have plans within plans, and if this thing fails, he still wins because he has this other thing over here, and while he's busy launching a major assault on this planet, he's getting what he actually wants on some other planet, or the shipyards in this case. The fact that it made this guy, even when he lost, the cost to the, rebel... they aren't rebels anymore. The New Republic.
The New Republic.
The cost of the New Republic was always very high, even when he lost. And it was almost impossible to beat him because if he loses here, he got a victory someplace else. So this guy seemed like a major, major threat, like you were describing, Krebs. He just he seemed unbeatable. Even when you beat him, you lost. Yeah. And he was so refined. He was so cultured, and you really had trouble hating him. I think one of the things about him is he never came across as evil. He was working on what we would traditionally think of as the bad guy side, but unlike the other characters that we'd seen to this point, he wasn't necessarily evil. He just had a goal. He was focused on it, and he was an extreme threat in accomplishing those goals.
He was determined and committed to his outcome.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, he definitely was he's an anti-villain. He's not really a villain, but he's kind of the villain of the story.
He's the opposing force.
Yes,
right?
He's the opposing force, but he's not the villain. And, Timothy Zahn, like, Matthew said, did a perfect job because Star Wars at that point was Vader. Vader was the menacing force that just was wiping the floor, and he'd crush a guy's windpipe out of frustration and anger, very emotional and reactionary. And then here comes, the Empire is falling. Here comes the fleet at the head of Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he's not emotional. He's calculating. He's, every move, there's other moves planned. And it was, when I read this, it was amazing because most villains, let's use example, Bond villains. It seems like they have all these pieces, but they do stupid things. They go into these monologues, and James Bond always gets away, and he can win the day. Like Matthew said, even when he goes into monologues, he knows he's won. Even if he loses this battle, there's three or four other battles he's just won. And that's okay. Or he's forced the New Republic to lose so much that it cost them more to win this one battle than it did for him. And that was what was so amazing about this character. And you're just like, how are the heroes going to win? Like, even when they win, they lose. And it was amazing. It was amazing to have this character, and you can't not love this character. It's not like you hate him so bad like Joffrey that you just want him to die. you hate how this guy is winning, but you also respect it and don't want this guy to be killed off because he's such an amazing character. And we see that time and time again. Also, looking at the cast, Lars Mikkelsen is returning as Thrawn in the live action, which is brilliant because he's got the voice and everything. So I'm excited that Disney is, like Bo-Katan, they're using the original voice actors to actually play the characters.
In a bit of irony, the way you describe Thrawn and his tactics, all I can say, tongue-in-cheek, it is so artistically done.
Yes, very much so.
So, it occurs to me that maybe some people aren't familiar with this character, Thrawn. They love Star Wars, but they're not certain who Thrawn is. Maybe they haven't seen the animation or they haven't read the books. And Daniel, you were giving us kind of an introduction to him, and we've talked about some of his character traits.
Yeah.
But can we give just a really fast summary of who Thrawn is to the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, so Thrawn in the Star Wars universe really is, like I said, he's an anti-villain, but at the same time a double agent. He's working for the Empire under the Emperor, but at the same time, he's also working for the Chiss Ascendancy. He's doing stuff for them. It just happens to be right now the two goals align. And, because so the Chiss Ascendancy is in active extragalactic warfare with the Gris. And he's using the Imperial resources to help fight that. He has a massive Star Destroyer, which is called the Chimera. And it's the only Star Destroyer that has a design printed on the hull. So it is very unique and distinct. That's really the best way to describe who he is.
From my experience of Thrawn, which was primarily the Timothy Zahn trilogy, because I am still, to this day, playing catch-up on the Rebels cartoon. It would really help if I actually watched them.
Yes.
But my experience with Thrawn kind of like fell in that category of the bad guys are always sexy. Like Boba Fett, we've talked about this before. The only reason that Boba Fett exists outside of Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back is because he looked freaking cool. He was the quiet, bounty hunter, and and he spoke up to Vader, right?
Yes.
He's like, "What about me? He's no good to me, dead." And then all that stuff. And then Vader spoke to him as an equal, not an underling, right? Except for the time where he looks at Boba Fett and says, "No disintegrations." But that was like a customer making a demand of someone providing a service, right?
And then of course we had no clue what that meant until we saw The Mandalorian. And then we're like,
oh, now we know. Now we know what disintegrations look like.
As far as appearance with Thrawn, he stands out. He looks humanoid like everyone else.
He's a near human, they describe him.
Everything we've seen in episode 4, 5, and 6, all of the Imperial officers were wearing gray and black. Thrawn shows up in crisp white, white jacket, white slacks, boots, and he has deep blue skin and black hair and red eyes.
Yeah.
Nothing we've ever seen before. We've seen a lot of strange creatures show up in Star Wars, but
one of the things that I really liked about Thrawn when I was reading about him was his tactics to understanding how to dismantle an enemy. His number one thing, like we've already mentioned, that he's not Sith. He doesn't have control of the Force, but he
really respects the Force, though.
Yes, he does. Well, he respects any opponent. Right? Like he respects the opponent until there's nothing left to respect about the opponent. And his approach is, if you want to dissemble, if you want to tear apart your opponent, you don't have to worry about doing it physically. In fact, most enemies will think that they're dying with honor. the more that they suffer. And so you can't just go at them with sheer brute force all the time, because you might get them to crumble, but you don't necessarily tear your opponent apart. You usually make a martyr out of them, and then you have a rising force to worry about. What he does instead is he learns about their culture primarily through their art. He uses their art pieces, and he analyzes them. And when you're reading this, in Timothy Zahn's novels, he'll describe the art piece, and some of it is very abstract. But then Thrawn starts dissecting it and starts pulling out little tidbits of information and extracting the information, and it's brilliant. It's genius. You're watching genius unfold. And he uses that information, and he uses that concept of their culture to understand where their weak points are, and then he starts attacking those instead and pries them apart. This is what makes him truly threatening to me.
And another really big difference in dichotomies with this character. So Vader typically punished failure, like immediately, where Thrawn promoted creativity among his crew. He accepted other ideas from his subordinates, and we didn't see that a lot. I mean, even Tarkin was very similar to Vader, where it's like, oh, you failed, you're out. He didn't accept failure. And we saw that in Rebels too. With Governor Price and I can't remember the other guy's name, but he eventually defected. So it was very interesting. The other interesting thing when they moved Thrawn into the Disney era, there were two projects going on. There was the Death Star project, or Stardust, and then there was Thrawn's TIE Defender project. TIE Defenders are amazing vehicles, and they were designed that they could U-turn in space. TIE fighters can't. They got to take this big long turnaround, and these could flip on a dime and attack. They could be moving forward, they have an X-wing behind them, they can flip around, and now they're head to head, and they could take out the X-wing or whatever easily. Unfortunately, Tarkin chose to go with Project Stardust over that. This is how brilliant he is as a tactician and a creator and an innovator. I honestly believe, had they gone with the Defenders, the Rebels would have been wiped out very easily had they mass-produced these ships.
Matai, that brings up a good question, which is, what was a Thrawn move that just demanded you respect the guy?
There was a number of things that he did. I mean, when he seized control of the Katana fleet, that was when I thought, oh, we're doomed. It was one of those things like, I know the good guys have to win, but I have no idea how they could possibly do it now. That was amazing. He stole those mining drones or devices from Lando Calrissian, which is what brought him into the story. And people had only thought of them for use in mining operations, and instead he uses them as boarding devices to take over a ship. I mean, just that kind of creative thinking, creative use of things that nobody else was thinking of this. Nobody else recognized the threat that he put in there. And Timothy Zahn, with the stuff that he had done, this character he created out of whole cloth. I had been under the impression when I read these books that he wrote them based on George Lucas's notes, and this was the intended sequel trilogy. That's not the case. Lucas gave him a few notes. I mean, my notes is instructions, and says, you have to, these are the guidelines within which you have to stay. But other than that, the story, the plot was all Timothy Zahn. And when I read these novels, even the original Star Wars characters gave me the feeling of these are the same characters growing. Yeah. And not only did he create Thrawn, which I loved, but he also is the one who created Mara Jade.
And Coruscant. Coruscant did not exist before Timothy Zahn.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. He created Coruscant as the center of the Star Wars galaxy.
Wow. And there was a few other things that he put in there that I didn't necessarily like. The Ysalamiri anti-force creatures. I didn't see how that fit in with the lore as we knew it, and that kind of upset me. But it made for a very interesting plot complication. The story revolved around what happens when a Jedi loses his connection to the Force.
Jedi.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this one last thing. My favorite scene from the books is when R2 lets out a whoop that says, "Luke's here, don't fire," because he recognizes that Lando and his buddies are about to do this ambush, and he's like, "Wait, I have something in mind here." And one of the guys says to Lando, "Well, Luke's not a Jedi. He can't feel the Force on this planet." And Lando really has a crisis for a moment, turns his blaster on his friend and says, "Luke is always a Jedi, whether he can touch the Force or not." And that demonstration of character, that trust with somebody that you haven't seen in a long time, but you fought like brothers in arms, kind of a bond. And sure enough, Luke pulled it out, and that was the right call to make. And I just love that. Even though he can't feel the Force, it made Luke stand out as a better character. He doesn't need the Force to be a Jedi. He's always a Jedi. And I kind of wish the sequel trilogy that we got had been able to tell that kind of a story, and instead they kind of took Luke another direction that I did not like. This was a fantastic direction to take him instead.
No, I have to agree. And this is what frustrated me so much about that sequel trilogy. Okay, so we have these books. We have these fantastic, amazing, wonderful stories of Luke Skywalker and the direction he went. And I get Mark Hamill had aged quite a bit by the time they came around to doing these. And he wasn't fit as, he wasn't the right age either. But you have this character, Luke Skywalker, that has overcome all these challenges. Like, he's on a planet where he can't connect to the Force, and yet he still is able to save the day. He's able to overcome these obstacles. And yet in the sequel trilogy, he has a moment of doubt and weakness. We all do. Ignites his lightsaber over the bed of his nephew. His nephew sees him and brings the house down on him. And then he takes off and hides on a island and drinks sea cow juice. Not the Luke Skywalker that I read. Not the Luke Skywalker that went against Thrawn and faced him down. And I really hope, because looking at the cast, Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen is listed on the cast for Ahsoka. I would love to see somehow maybe even Luke being incorporated into that. So we can see they do mention the tagline, "the heir to the Empire," in the trailer. And that, like, the hair on my arms stood on end, because oh my gosh, maybe we'll get some of this story, and maybe we can see younger Luke going to him, and maybe that would explain some of a more broken down Luke later on because of the battles with Thrawn and stuff like that.
I've got another question for you. Did you guys hear the latest news about Tusken Raiders?
Oh, no.
No.
Well, apparently they have some tax issues. They've got some tax fraud. Apparently, they always single file to conceal their numbers. I got you on that one, huh?
That was a good one. That was apropos to the month and everything.
Well, I can't end on that then. Oi, brother. Yeah. How does Wicket get around Endor?
Ewoks.
That's right.
Ewoks. Oh my gosh.
Okay, now I'm back in form. Okay.
Now make a pun with low grain. Really impress me.
He jumps on a speeder and takes off.
So to kind of like bring it back to the core concept here, or the reason why we're talking about this, when you saw in the Ahsoka trailer, Thrawn's back, not even his face, Thrawn's back. What happened to you in that moment?
Well, I mean, for me, it was the same as when I was watching Rebels. I'm watching Rebels, and he walks in for the first time,
and
I'm just like, I'm just stunned. I'm speechless because this is the first time I've seen Thrawn. So that was amazing. Now we're getting to see him in live action. It would be It would have been amazing to see Heir to the Empire trilogy on film. It really would have.
Yeah.
But now we're getting him on the big mini whatever screen you want to call it. Some people's TVs are pretty massive, but we're getting to see that, and that is amazing. And not only that, as cool as it is to see it in the CG animated films, in my opinion, Star Wars still exists in its best form is on the screen in live action.
Yes.
I still, to this day, think that is the best. I still love Bad Batch and Clone Wars and Rebels. It's better than a cartoon because, well, cartoon hasn't really worked. We saw droids and Ewoks. But to see it just makes it more real, in my opinion, to see the live action.
Absolutely.
Seeing Cad Bane in The Mandalorian.
That was
live
incredible.
Action was incredible and amazing. Even though I've seen him so much in Clone Wars, there is just something that makes that just a little bit more real in my mind.
It's the magic of the original trilogy, which is that the vast majority of the special effects in the original 77, 80, and 83 cuts was that everything was practical effects, right? Yes, there was rotoscoping over physical objects. Yes, there was composition shots with models that exploded using a computer-controlled gimbal and everything.
And
right?
the models were really incredible, and they really pioneered the what's it called when they have repeatable camera motion? I mean, ILM invented that for the movie.
They invented the computer system that drove the gimbal so they could get the same sequence of camera movements over and over and over again.
Right.
And the way that they treated Cad Bane in the in the Boba Fett series, the way that they treated Cad Bane made him tangible. It made him something you could touch. And the same thing is true of Grogu and Mando and all these other elements in the Star Wars universe that we see. Even the frickin' Sarlacc, even that thing, right? When you do things with practical effects, it makes it real. And we, when I say we, I mean Star Wars fans like unto us, the whole spectrum of people who know who Thrawn is. We have been dying for a truly fantastic real life interpretation of Thrawn. And even just in this trailer, just watching him walk, I was like, oh my smokes, this is happening. And then you're right, Rosario Dawson, Ahsoka, said the thing, right? Oh, she said the thing. She says the heir to the Empire. And it was like, oh no! And I was like super excited that the white-haired Sith Lord was going to be like Jorah Sabaoth, but it ends up it's not. It's Baylan Skoll. But anyway,
it's okay.
But with all of this that's happened, what do you think? I'm going to start with Matthew on this one. Matthew, what do you think are the chances that we will see the Timothy Zahn trilogy done live action style, like in the next 5-10 years? What do you think are the chances?
I think it's not. With the extended universe being made non-canon, the way that Lucasfilm, especially under Disney's supervision, is cherry picking things from the extended universe, I don't see how the story that Timothy Zahn wrote for that trilogy could fit with the canon that they have created now. However, they have successfully pulled characters from it, and I am really excited to see what they do with Thrawn. The fact that they've got Lars Mikkelsen playing him in real life, that's a person who's been literally inside the character. So he's going to do it justice. I don't see any way he couldn't.
Also, he's a Mikkelsen.
Yes. There's there's a lot of talent runs in that family. So I think he's going to be great. I think the story is going to be very different I just don't see how they could pull the timeline is so different. The characters that he depended on, that he wove into the story, are now much older or dead. So I just don't see that story coming to pass. However, if they can pull out Thrawn, I think we are way overdue for Mara Jade.
Oh yes. But if you do Mara Jade, you have to bring back Luke.
I think we'll see bits and pieces of the Heir to the Empire series. I don't think they can do it because a lot of the characters aren't there. I mean, we don't have Han, we don't have Leia, we don't have Luke, really. We've seen a younger Luke. We could maybe see a younger Leia because of Carrie Fisher's daughter. We don't have anyone that can play a younger Han, really. I mean, let's face it, for some reason, the only one that can really do Han is Harrison Ford, and he's way too old.
Tell that to Indiana Jones Part 5.
And not only that, Empire, Leia's pregnant. I understand what Disney was trying to do from a business standpoint. They were trying to clear the junk so that they can make their Star Wars their thing. But I think that was probably a big mistake. Instead of picking, hey, we know this exists out there. We're going to make a Star Wars movie, but we're going to put it over here where no one's touched anything. Or even put it in the Imperial, but we're going to have these other characters. Instead, they wanted to sweep it all and do this and change things. And they threw out such great material. They threw out things that, like this series, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, was amazing and so well done. As well as so many other things like KOTOR and that, but that's all been swiped away as legends. But the problem with that is there's so much. How is it all legends? There's got to be some truth in there, and you got to start bringing it back. And I think that's why, at least in my opinion, the Star Wars fans are so enraged with everything, is because instead of we bought this because we know it has this fan base and we're going to make money from them, they're just like, let's get rid of this. Everything the fans have liked, we're going to make our own stuff. Of course they're upset. They're enraged because I would love to see Mara Jade show up in Ahsoka. That would be beautiful.
That'd be amazing.
Even if she's just, she's a bodyguard for Thrawn because he's found her and she was the right hand of the Emperor. That would be amazing. But I don't know if we'll get it because as far as we know, Luke never got married because he doesn't have kids. And because his kid was Ben Skywalker. Well, we know Ben Solo is floating around there, and they never had Anakin or Jason and Jaina or anything like that. And these are all characters that were amazing post Empire, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's almost like Star Wars needs a what if series, right? And I think you both have made salient arguments around this. And I thought for a moment I had a new hope, but not anymore. My co-host struck back, but actually, here's the thing. We have the technology. We do have a body of actors that would be reasonable, youthful interpretations of these characters, though the original actors are much more aged by comparison, right? Sorry, Mark Hamill, for saying that out loud. I love you. You will always be young for me. But we do have a body of actors that we can pull from. I know this always comes up all the time, but Sebastian Stan as a Luke in his current age would be perfectly, be great fit. The actor who played Han in the movie Solo is an acceptable likeness. There's another actor who was like a YouTube influencer who actually looks like Harrison Ford, but he doesn't have the acting chops.
I disagree on that. But young Lando Calrissian,
Donald Glover.
Yeah. Donald Glover, yes. Him, yes.
Donald Glover. And then the Chewie's a little easier, right? You just got to find a really tall Danish guy. But anyway,
and they already have one in there.
I know. Yeah. That's why I said it that way. But Leia is I think a harder one to cast. I know her daughter is still here, but let's be honest, her daughter does not look that much like her. She might have the same mannerisms, but she doesn't look like her. But all that said, we have the technology, we have the body of actors, we have a fan base that, to your point, Daniel, has been disenfranchised to a certain degree because Disney, with all of its creative powers and resources, instead of leaning hard into the stuff that we already loved, forced a rewrite. And when that happens, sometimes good things occur, like The Mandalorian. And I know where you stand on this, but I loved the series Andor. I thought those things were really good. And then some not so great things happen, like the problems that we see with the trilogy. There were some with the sequel trilogy. Thank you. Episodes 7, 8, and 9. There were some good things that came out of that, and there were some bad things that came out of that. Given that the Ahsoka series is, a Filoni series, a Favreau series, I have high hopes and expectations that the Thrawn we see on screen is the Thrawn we've seen in our imagination for decades, right?
I already know what it's going to be because Dave Filoni did Rebels. So it's the same Thrawn. It's going to come across.
Absolutely.
We're not going to get someone different, which is fantastic. That's why we trust this character to him. I don't think I would trust it to anyone else. Now, I know there's probably going to be other directors, directing these episodes, and he is going to be leading that march. But I am excited. I'm excited to see that. Now, I will say with Disney's announcements, I'm not so excited about the new movie 15 years later with Rey. I am excited about the one that's going to be in The Mandalorian, sphere of influence that they've announced, and Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are in charge of that. But I am really excited about The First Jedi. They've decided to finally get away, go into the history to create a storyline. We don't really know that. We have bits and pieces. And this is where I think Disney could really excel. Get away from the chunk we really know and have loved, and to build something that's just as amazing in this world that we will love and we will be excited about.
I think that's extremely well said.
You mean getting away from the Skywalker family and investigating some more of the universe, right?
Yes. I mean, this universe is tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years old, and we have so much time and space. Let's explore that, whether it's the past or the future. Them creating the High Republic era, I think, is great because we don't have anything in that. Play with it all you want, but just make sure you don't break our Star Wars by throwing in another thing like midichlorians.
Yeah. So folks out there, we've talked about several topics, but mostly Grand Admiral Thrawn, who is an incredible character in the Star Wars universe. If you have not yet, go out and read Timothy Zahn's Star Wars trilogy, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. And if you're feeling particularly ambitious after reading that trilogy, check out the Thrawn series, books 1 through 3, because there is a trilogy dedicated just to Thrawn and his past. Yes. Absolutely phenomenal character. I so adore that they got Lars Mikkelsen to represent him, because there's only a handful of people on this planet who could represent Thrawn in live action properly, and a Mikkelsen, be it Mads or Lars, is perfect.
Yes, I loved this. I loved those books. Can't recommend them enough. Like I said, it maintained the feel of Star Wars. In my opinion, the look, feel, theme of Star Wars was more true in the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire trilogy than it was in the sequel trilogy. And I'll fight you on that.
If you want to read the newer stuff because you don't want to read the Heir to the Empire stuff because the newer stuff is canon, that's fine. The nice thing about those books is it gives you enough information about Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars era that you can really understand Anakin. And it starts to put pieces together so that you can understand kind of his motivation to becoming Vader and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And you get a really cool glimpse at Thrawn. Both series are great. Is canon. One is now Legends. but they're great reads. They're fantastic. Timothy Zahn blessed us with a fantastic character that I am excited to see how this character is played out in live action. We get to see this amazing character, and it will make this character just a little bit more real to all of us. So with that said, we're out of here.
And my little nerdlings, let your geek flag fly. So say we all.
And whether you're rooting for the Empire or you're rooting for Thrawn, it's the same thing. Always remember to be epic and don't suck.
Thrawn never sucks.
Never.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.